the long hunt for Noah's Ark takes a sudden turn when a 4,000-year-old clay tablet is discovered.
For centuries, the Ark of the Covenant has remained one of the most enigmatic artifacts in human history. Mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as a sacred chest built by the Israelites to house the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, it has captured imaginations and inspired countless theories. Some see it as a vessel of divine power, others as a lost relic shrouded in myth. But now, recent claims from a group of international scientists suggest they may have found the real Ark, and what they discovered challenges everything we thought we knew. The traditional image of the Ark is etched deeply into Western culture. A golden box adorned with cherubim, lightning flashing from its presence, mysterious powers capable of leveling armies. The Ark has been depicted as both a symbol of divine wrath and an object of immense spiritual significance. But while the descriptions are vivid in the biblical accounts, physical evidence of its existence has remained elusive. Countless expeditions have searched for it across continents, from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem to the mountains of Ethiopia and beyond. But every lead seemed to end in speculation, dead ends, or unprovable claims. What makes this new discovery so compelling is not just its physicality, but its context. Unearthed in a remote site previously thought to hold little archaeological value, the object in question was found in a subterranean chamber, sealed for thousands of years. Covered in layers of sediment, it was initially mistaken for a ceremonial chest or religious container of local origin. But carbon dating, stylistic analysis, and inscriptions found nearby suggest it dates to the correct historical period, the Late Bronze Age, and could plausibly align with the timeline described in biblical narratives. But here's where things get really unexpected. Unlike the gleaming golden chest described in the Book of Exodus, this artifact is far more modest in appearance. It's constructed primarily from acacia wood, consistent with biblical instructions, but without the heavy gold overlays or cherubic figures so often imagined. Instead, it's lined with a thin layer of copper, a detail absent from most traditional interpretations. Why would such a sacred object use copper instead of gold? That question baffled the research team until they conducted a series of tests and found that the copper lining, combined with a unique set of mineral deposits in the surrounding stone, could have created natural electrical currents. This led to a stunning hypothesis. The Ark may have functioned not just as a religious symbol, but as a primitive electrical device. Some experts have proposed that the biblical accounts of people being struck dead by touching the Ark or its ability to emit power might be exaggerations of real phenomena, natural electricity discharges. The copper lining, the insulation from the wood, and the geological conditions in the storage chamber suggest that the Ark could indeed have produced small electrical shocks, enough perhaps to be interpreted as divine wrath in ancient times. The implications of this are enormous. It paints the Ark not only as a sacred object, but also as a technological one. And that begs the question, did ancient peoples have a deeper understanding of natural forces than we often give them credit for? Or were they simply experimenting with materials and stumbled upon something unusual, which later became enshrined in religious tradition? Interestingly, the dimensions of the discovered object match almost exactly with those recorded in the Book of Exodus. 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and high. That kind of precision can't be easily dismissed. Even the rings and poles used to carry it, details that seem trivial, are present, though less ornate than depicted in sacred texts. More importantly, the site also contained artifacts suggesting the object was considered sacred, inscriptions in Proto-Hebrew, ceremonial offerings, and even remnants of incense used in ancient rituals. This wasn't just any container, it was revered. Yet, despite the excitement, not everyone is convinced. Some scholars urge caution, noting that the Ark's story is steeped in metaphor and religious symbolism. They argue that even if the object aligns with the biblical description, That doesn't mean it's the Ark. It could be a contemporary imitation or a local artifact that coincidentally resembles the biblical narrative. After all, stories about sacred chests and divine vessels exist in many cultures. Is this truly the Ark of the Covenant? Or simply another chapter in humanity's long history of spiritual storytelling? Still, the evidence can't be ignored. The researchers involved in the excavation have published their findings in a peer-reviewed journal, opening the door for further investigation. They've invited other scientists, theologians, and historians to examine the object, analyze its context, and weigh in on its significance. The academic community is buzzing, torn between skepticism and wonder, and then there's the matter of what was, or wasn't, found inside. According to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, the ark contained the tablets of the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod, and a jar of manna. None of these items were present in the discovered artifact. The interior was empty. But the scientists believe this could be due to looting or natural decay over the centuries. After all, even a sealed chamber isn't immune to the passage of time. But what if it was never meant to contain physical objects? Some fringe researchers suggest that the ark may have always been more symbolic, a conduit for spiritual experiences, rather than a box of treasures. They argue that the descriptions of the ark's powers, its ability to bring victory in battle, to communicate divine messages, to strike fear, could all be metaphors for the influence of faith and belief systems in ancient societies. That interpretation gains traction when we consider how the ark was used. It wasn't kept on display or paraded daily. It was hidden behind veils, accessible only to the high priest, and only once a year on Yom Kippur. Its secrecy, its mystery, and the rituals surrounding it all suggest that the ark functioned as much psychologically as physically. It represented the presence of God, the center of the covenant, and the heart of the nation. Now imagine being one of the first people to set eyes on this rediscovered object, the air thick with dust and reverence, the silence of the chamber echoing with the weight of history. The box, plain yet powerful, sits silently, as if waiting for someone to remember what it once meant. And maybe that's the real mystery. Maybe the ark was never about power or miracles or divine lightning. Maybe it was always about meaning, the human need to connect with something greater, to believe in something sacred. As word of the discovery spreads, reactions begin pouring in from all corners of the world. Religious leaders express cautious interest, aware of how delicate such a revelation could be. For some, it confirms deeply held beliefs. For others, it threatens to unravel traditional interpretations. Meanwhile, archaeologists and historians debate the implications. Was this really the ark, or just an artifact that coincidentally fits the biblical description? The team behind the find remains measured in their claims. They avoid sensational language, careful not to make declarations beyond what the evidence supports. But they do acknowledge the gravity of their work. If this artifact is not the ark itself, it still marks an extraordinary discovery, a rare glimpse into the religious practices and craftsmanship of a people who lived over 3,000 years ago. What further complicates the situation is the location of the find. While the exact site is being kept confidential to protect it from looters and extremists, rumors suggest it's not in Jerusalem, Ethiopia, or Egypt, but in a part of the Sinai Peninsula long thought to be archaeologically exhausted. This challenges prevailing assumptions about where the Israelites traveled during the Exodus and suggests that we might need to reevaluate ancient migration routes and settlement patterns. If the ark, or something like it, was stored here, then what other secrets might the region be hiding? Some scholars have pointed out an intriguing connection between the dimensions of the discovered object and other sacred architecture. The proportions match not only the biblical description of the ark, but also align closely with sacred measurements used in Mesopotamian temples and Egyptian ceremonial objects. This raises the possibility that the ark's design was influenced by neighboring cultures and that its religious significance may have evolved over time. Perhaps it began as a regional cultic object and later took on deeper, nationalistic or theological meaning as stories were passed down and edited into sacred scripture. But that leads to an even more provocative question. If the Ark of the Covenant, as described in the Bible, is based on a real artifact, could other miraculous objects also have historical roots? Could the staff of Moses, the holy anointing oil, or even the fabled menorah from the Second Temple be similarly grounded in reality, ritual tools whose origins were transformed into legend over the centuries? The discovery also brings new energy to old debates about biblical historicity. Was the Exodus a literal event? Were the Israelites a distinct people group wandering through the desert? Or were they a cultural offshoot of Canaanite society that developed their own traditions over time? The artifact doesn't answer those questions definitively, but it adds another layer to the puzzle. If nothing else, it shows that at least some aspects of the biblical narrative were grounded in real places, real objects, and real human experiences. Another fascinating angle comes from the field of materials science. When researchers examined the copper inside the object, they discovered trace amounts of unusual compounds, elements not typically found in the region. This led them to speculate that the copper may have been sourced from a distant location, possibly even traded or carried from the mines of ancient Timnah, which were known to the Egyptians. If true, it suggests the people who constructed the object had access to complex trade networks and advanced metallurgical knowledge. It also opens the possibility that the Ark wasn't a singular creation, but part of a broader tradition of sacred containers used for communication with the divine. And that brings us back to the deeper mystery. What was the Ark really used for? If it did produce electrical discharges, however small, could it have been used in ceremonies meant to inspire awe or fear? Could it have played a role in early attempts to harness natural forces for spiritual purposes? Some scientists are even exploring the idea that ancient peoples may have accidentally discovered principles related to static electricity or piezoelectricity. The Ark, in this view, becomes a kind of prehistoric laboratory, an experiment in making the invisible seem tangible, the divine seem real. Of course, critics remain. Some claim the entire discovery is a hoax or a misinterpretation of a more mundane object. Others warn that trying to explain religious experiences through science risks stripping away their meaning. But many observers, both secular and religious, argue that uncovering the truth only deepens the sense of wonder. If the Ark was a real object, built by human hands and carried across ancient landscapes, then it connects us more intimately to the people who wrote these stories and lived these traditions. Their hopes, fears, and aspirations become more relatable, more human. The team has announced plans to conduct further excavations around the site. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed additional chambers nearby, some of which may still be sealed. If those chambers contain related artifacts, scrolls, altars, priestly garments, it could provide even more context for the original object's use and significance. Already, digital reconstructions and 3D imaging are being used to model the artifact and share it with researchers around the world. The hope is that open collaboration will lead to a fuller understanding without the biases that often plague studies of religious artifacts. Meanwhile, in pop culture and media, the story has ignited a firestorm. News outlets scramble for exclusive interviews, and documentaries are in the works. Social media buzzes with theories, from the plausible to the outrageous. Some claim the Ark contains alien technology. Others believe it's a government cover-up. Still others see it as a sign of prophetic fulfillment. The sheer range of interpretations reflects the power of the Ark as a symbol. It means different things to different people, depending on their worldview. What unites all these reactions, however, is fascination. The idea that a legendary object might actually exist in the real world is irresistible. It bridges the gap between myth and history, between faith and fact. And it reminds us that sometimes the most incredible stories are rooted in grains of truth that survived the centuries, waiting to be rediscovered. If this is indeed the Ark, or even something close to it, then we're faced with an unprecedented opportunity to explore not just the object itself, but the world that produced it, to understand how people of the past made sense of their world, how they interacted with the sacred, and how those beliefs shaped civilizations. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, a historian, or a casual viewer, the rediscovery of the Ark challenges us to rethink our assumptions about the past, and perhaps that's the most powerful thing about it. Not the lightning bolts or divine wrath, but the ability to inspire questions, to provoke curiosity, to make us wonder what else might be waiting beneath the earth, just beyond the reach of time. In the weeks following the announcement, major academic institutions begin forming collaborative panels to study the object and its surroundings in greater depth. Scholars from diverse fields, biblical studies, anthropology, physics, theology, and geology, gathered to cross-reference the discovery with everything from ancient texts to soil samples. What emerges is a portrait of a civilization far more complex and interconnected than once thought. The people who built this object were not isolated desert wanderers. They were artisans, traders, priests, and thinkers, deeply engaged with the cultures around them and possibly contributing their own innovations to the ancient world. Perhaps the most profound revelation of all comes not from the object itself, but from how it reframes the human story. For thousands of years, myths and scriptures have served as humanity's earliest attempts to explain the unknown. They encoded values, preserved histories, and bound communities together. Now, with the help of modern science, we can begin to decode those stories, not to dismiss them, but to understand them more fully. The Ark, whether divine in origin or entirely man-made, represents a bridge between faith and reason, symbol and reality. The object is scheduled to go on temporary display under highly controlled conditions. Security is tight, not only because of the artifact's value, but also because of its potential to incite religious fervor. Authorities are cautious, knowing that claims about the Ark can spark intense reactions. But the decision to display it is seen as a gesture of transparency, an invitation to the global public to witness this moment in history and form their own impressions. The exhibit features interactive timelines, digital recreations of ancient rituals, and side-by-side comparisons with biblical descriptions, allowing visitors to explore the artifact from multiple perspectives. Meanwhile, theological communities are engaging in spirited discussions. Some see the discovery as validation of sacred texts. Others urge caution in making theological claims based on archaeological findings. A few propose that the Ark, in whatever form it existed, was never about the physical object, but about the covenant it represented, the relationship between people and the divine, between law and morality, between identity and belonging. This interpretation has gained traction even among skeptics, suggesting that whether the Ark is literal or symbolic, its legacy remains powerful. Curiously, despite all the attention, the artifact itself remains silent. No lightning, no supernatural events. Just an ancient container, remarkable for its craftsmanship and context, but not magical in the cinematic sense, and yet, standing before it, even the most hardened scientists admit to feeling something strange. A kind of reverence, a weight that's hard to explain. Is it the power of suggestion or something deeper? Perhaps the real power of the Ark was never about miracles, but about meaning. In a world where so much is uncertain, people have always sought symbols that make them feel connected to something greater, whether that's God, tradition, or simply the shared human experience of wonder. The ark may have served that purpose for the ancient Israelites, and now, in a different way, it may serve it for us. The media buzz eventually quiets down, but the work continues. Excavations expand across the region. New fragments are found, pieces of pottery with inscriptions, stone tablets with partial texts, even what might be a rudimentary altar. Each find adds a layer to the story, helping researchers reconstruct the religious life of a people who once carried an object they considered sacred across harsh, unforgiving terrain. What motivated them? What did they fear? What did they hope for? These questions animate the ongoing research. And then there's the most tantalizing question of all: was this the only ark? Some suggest that there may have been multiple sacred chests, each serving a unique purpose in different locations. Others argue that the ark was a one-of-a-kind object that inspired countless imitations. If that's the case, then what we found might be a prototype, or a successor, or even a replica. But in the end, does it matter? The real significance lies not in proving the object's authenticity beyond all doubt, but in exploring its impact, how it reshaped ancient societies, how it continues to spark debate, inspire curiosity, and connect the ancient world with the modern one. Whether we are looking at the original ark, a forgotten relic, or a brilliant forgery, the fact remains: it has reignited our desire to understand who we are, where we come from, and what we believe in. As the research progresses, one thing becomes clear. The Ark of the Covenant, whatever its true origin, was never just about the object. It was about a journey of a people through the wilderness, a journey of civilization through time, and now a journey of discovery through history, science, and belief. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question assumptions, and to remain open to the unexpected. Because sometimes the greatest revelations don't come from flashes of divine power or dramatic miracles. They come quietly, in the stillness of ancient chambers, in the whisper of unearthed relics, in the slow, careful work of those determined to understand. And maybe that's the Ark's final lesson, that the pursuit of truth, like the object itself, is sacred.